For 12 days in June, Israel and Iran engaged in a fierce exchange of fire. In the aftermath, both countries claimed victory, downplaying the damage caused by the other side.
אנחנו נלחמנו בעוז נגד איראן והשגנו ניצחון גדול.
رژیم صهیونی در زیر ضربات جمهوری اسلامی تقریباً از پا درآمد و له شد.
But perhaps in the fallout of conflict, there is one casualty not yet accounted for: the United Nations and the global order it represents. US President Donald Trump came into office for his second term, promising peace.
We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into.
As the Israel-Iran conflict unfolded, on June 19th, President Trump said he will take up to 2 weeks to consider American involvement. Yet, in just 3 days, the US military launched airstrikes as part of Operation Midnight Hammer, joining Israel's war against Iran. 3 critical nuclear sites were targeted: Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. This marks the first direct attack by Washington on the Islamic Republic in this conflict.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Was this impromptu? Probably not. I think, there's some good reason to believe that the 2 weeks were a ruse to catch the Iranians off guard.
Now, within the United States government, there were basically these 2 sets of voices, one of which was very isolationist and saying that we shouldn't get involved, right? But there was also that other set of voices that were rather more hawkish. That were saying that the US will have to do something militarily about Iran's alleged nuclear ambitions.
The American strike on Iran raised questions about the scope of presidential war powers. The US Constitution grants Congress the sole power to declare war, not the president.
Politicians on both sides have spoken up and queried the use of force in this instance. That the president, did not go to Congress to seek its approval. So that particular debate continues.
On the international front, the legality of both Israeli and American actions are also being debated, and the outcome could call the current rules-based order into question. After World War II, the United Nations, or UN, and the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, were established in 1945. The goal is to mediate conflicts and uphold international law. Article 2, Section 4 of the United Nations Charter states that members are to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The Charter, however, recognizes one exception. Article 51 states that a state may use force if it is responding to an armed attack.
In other words, if you are convinced that your adversary is going to attack you, the laws of armed conflict can allow for what they call preemptive self-defense. The challenge, of course, is then to demonstrate that the Iranian nuclear program, whether it was a weapons program or otherwise, constituted a clear and present danger to the United States.
The UN had spoken out against the initial Israeli strikes. A group of UN-appointed experts subsequently condemned the American bombardment.
We must act immediately and decisively to halt the fighting and return to serious, sustained negotiations on the Iran nuclear program.
Yet words aside, the UN largely watched from the sidelines. From Russia's invasion of Ukraine to the war in Gaza, and now the Israel-Iran conflict, the UN had proven ineffective in stopping hostilities.
The UN has not been able to function because the global system is dominated by certain powers. The global system is not what the UN Charter says. The reality shows very, very clearly that the dominant powers control the world system, the global system.
The permanent 5 members of the Security Council, each of them wields a binding veto. So all it takes is for one state, right? Whether it's China, whether it's the United States, whether it's France or Britain, take your pick of the 5. If one of them vetoes any resolution, everything in a sense grinds to a halt.
In November last year, the International Criminal Court, or ICC, issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. They're accused of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity for their alleged roles in Gaza. While some ICC members said they support the ruling, others like France, Germany, and Italy were non-committal about detaining the Israeli leader. The episode exposed the flaw of the international system, both with UN resolutions and ICC rulings. Just who will enforce them?
The International Criminal Court, what it did was really out of the ordinary, issuing arrest warrants for Israeli leaders. So you can see that the ICC, the International Criminal Court, was prepared to play its role.
We cannot fault these institutions for not being able to undertake further action because we have always built those limitations into them. We had always relied on the fact that America, the hegemon, the benevolent leader of the world, would undertake the right actions. A lot of America's actions, not just its attack on Iran, but its other actions, withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, turning its back on the rest of NATO, Liberation Day tariffs. It is flailing about. It believes that by doing this, it advances America's own interests, making America great again in a way that disrespects entirely the legitimate wishes of the rest of the world.
As the multilateral world order splinters, countries look to align along other lines. For example, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim had urged Muslim nations to unite over Gaza.
Malaysia has always taken the position that the rights of the Palestinians should be restored, that they should have a homeland. That has been the Malaysian position. And Malaysia subscribes, as you know, to this idea of the two-state solution.
The Malaysian premier would later call out his counterparts for their silence over the Israel-Iran conflict. Prime Minister Anwar's position had some domestic support. In Malaysia, a few hundred people gathered outside the US Embassy to denounce the attack on Iran and express solidarity with Palestine and Iran. Muhammad Azmi Abdul Hamid was among them. He heads an Islamic non-governmental organization.
That was the culmination of, a lot of events happening in the Middle East, especially in Palestine, and focusing on Gaza. I think the awareness has spilled over to many people in this country. So we had a demonstration to express our position and to demand that United Nations really has to act. It cannot be an organization that's now failing everything about protecting civilians and implementing the universal human rights and also international law.
Elsewhere, BRICS leaders in the July meeting also condemned Israel's attack. BRICS is an intergovernmental organization made up of mostly Global South nations. It's increasingly seen as an alternative to the Western-led world order. China, a prominent member of BRICS, had been presenting itself as a stabilizing force amid trade and geopolitical tensions.
武力换不来中东的和平，对话谈判才是根本出路。
When we say China is seeking to bring the rest of the world along with it, it's very much a pull factor, not a push one. It doesn't seek to go into other nations to bring them along with it, but it says this is a system that's worked for me, and look, it's not the Western model.
China has always sort of projected itself as a champion of the global South. There are lots of holes that you can puncture into that assertion. But more generally, I think, we're moving towards a bipolar, if not a tripolar world. With other words, a world in which you have three superpowers, the United States, China, and India, ultimately.
Since the ceasefire, Iran had said it will pursue all legal avenues over what it says were unjust attacks on its territory. But whether an eventual international court ruling will have bite is unclear.
If Israel and the United States end up being unable to make a stronger case in the court, not just of the International Criminal Court or in the International Courts of Justice, but in the court of global public opinion, then this will be very much undermining of the international system, for which a lot of the world no longer has trust.
I think at the end of the day, this kind of institutions, it's really more symbolic than anything, right? It's that psychological effect that it has when people say, oh, okay, the UN is standing up to it, or the ICC is standing up to it, whatever it is. Even though we know at the end of the day, nothing much will happen.
This breakdown of the rules-based international order has serious implications. Countries may no longer heed international law when it comes to disputes, for example, around territorial claims in the South China Sea.
I'm seeing the world is moving away from this kind of multilateralism that we've had for the past 50, 60 years. We're going back to a kind of unilateral, realist architecture of security today, whereby it's really nation to nation, everyone to themselves, peace through strength.
It's a use of the principle of might makes right in a way that's at odds with our earlier understanding of the rules-based international order.
And in this new world order, some countries may seek the ultimate weapon to ensure their security.